It happened in Suffolk, near the coast. It happened in a tall, red-brick house built about 1770, which commands a view of the distant sea from the upper windows of the front. A sign on a post stands before the door, or did stand, for though it was an inn of repute once, I believe it is so no longer. To this inn one April came Mr. Thompson, a young man from the University of Cambridge seeking solitude and time for reading. These he found, for the landlord and his wife had been in service and could make a visitor comfortable, and there was no one else staying at the inn. He took a large room on the first floor, commanding the road and a view of the sea. He spent tranquil and uneventful days, work all the morning, an afternoon walk in the country round, a little conversation with the people of the inn in the evening, a little more reading and writing, and bed. The weather was delightful. One of Thompson's walks took him along the northern road across the heath. When he first chose this direction, his eye caught a white object to the left of the road and decided to make sure what this might be. It was a square block of white stone, fashioned like the base of a pillar, with a square hole in the upper surface. After taking stock of it, Mr. Thompson contemplated for a few minutes the view and so pursued his way. In the desultory talk in the bar that evening, he asked why the white stone was there on the common.
"Oh, that's an old-fashioned thing, that is," said the landlord, Mr. Betts. "We was none of us alive when that was put there. It stands pretty high. I dare say a sea mark was on it some time back. I have heard they could see it from the boats. But whatever there was, it's fell to bits this long time." "Good job, too," said someone. "'Tweren't a lucky mark, by what the old men used to say. Not lucky for the fishing, I mean to say."
"Why not?" said Thompson.
"Well, they had some funny ideas, them old chaps. I shouldn't wonder but what they made away with it."
Not every day did Thompson take his country walk. One fine afternoon found him indoors busily writing at 3 o'clock. Then he stretched himself and rose and walked out into the passage. Facing him was another room, the stairhead, and 2 more rooms, one looking out to the back, the other to the south. It seemed a shame to waste such a fine afternoon. However, work was paramount. But he thought he would take 5 minutes off and go back to it. And those 5 minutes he would employ, the Bettses could not possibly object, to looking at the other rooms in the passage which he had never seen. Nobody else, it seemed, was indoors. Very still the house was. The sun shone hot. Early flies buzzed in the window panes. So Thompson explored. The room facing his own was undistinguished except for an old print of Bury St. Edmunds. The 2 on his side of the passage were gay and clean. There remained the room opposite to the last which he had entered. This was locked. But Thompson was in a mood of curiosity, and feeling that there could be no damaging secrets in a place so easily got at, he proceeded to fetch the key of his own room, and when that did not answer, to collect the keys of the other 3. One of them fitted, and he opened the door. The room had windows looking south and west, so it was as bright and the sun was as hot upon it as could be. But here there was no carpet, but bare boards. No pictures, no washing stand. Only a bed in the farther corner. An iron bed with mattress and bolster, covered with a bluish check counterpane. It was as featureless a room as you can imagine, and yet there was something that made Thompson close the door very quickly and yet very quietly behind him, and lean against the windowsill in the passage, actually quivering all over. It was this: that under the counterpane someone lay, and not only lay, but stirred. That it was someone and not something was certain, because the shape of a head was unmistakable on the bolster. And yet it was all covered, and no one lies with covered head but a dead person. And this was not dead, not truly dead, for it heaved and shivered. If he had seen these things in dusk, Thompson could have comforted himself and talked of fancy. On this bright day, that was impossible. What was to be done? First, lock the door at all costs. Gingerly he approached it, and bending down, listened, holding his breath. Perhaps there might be a sound of heavy breathing and a prosaic explanation. There was absolute silence. But as he put the key into its hole and turned it, it rattled, and at once a stumbling, padding tread was heard coming towards the door. Thompson fled like a rabbit to his room and locked himself in. Futile enough, he knew. Would doors and locks be any obstacle to what he suspected? But nothing happened. Only there was a time of acute suspense, followed by a misery of doubt as to what to do. The impulse, of course, was to pack his bags and slip away as soon as possible from a house which contained such an inmate. But only the day before he had said that he should be staying for at least a week more. And how, if he changed his plans, could he avoid the suspicion of having pried into places where he had no business? Moreover, either the Bettses knew all about the inmate, and yet did not leave the house, or knew nothing, which meant there was nothing to be afraid of, or knew just enough to make them shut up the room, but not enough to weigh on their spirits. On the whole, the line of least resistance was to stay. So Thompson stayed out his week. Nothing took him past that door, and often as he would pause in a quiet hour of day or night in the passage and listen, no sound whatever issued from that direction. Thompson could have made some attempt at ferreting out stories connected with the inn, but no. The reticence which commonly falls on people who have had strange experiences and believe in them was upon him. Nevertheless, as the end of his stay grew near, his yearning for some kind of explanation grew more and more acute. He tried to think of some way of getting another daylight glimpse into that room. Eventually he arrived at a scheme. He would leave by an afternoon train, about 4 o'clock. When his cab was waiting and his luggage on it, he would make one last expedition upstairs, as if to look round his own room and see if anything was left unpacked, and then, with that key, which he had contrived to oil, as if that made any difference, the door should once more be opened for a moment and shut. So it worked out. The bill was paid, the consequent small talk gone through while the cab was loaded. Then, I'll just take a look upstairs, Thompson said, in case I've left a book or something out. No, don't trouble, Mr. Betts. I'll be back in a minute. And as noiselessly as possible, he stole upstairs to the door and opened it. Oh, the shattering of the illusion! He almost laughed aloud. Propped, or rather, sitting on the edge of the bed, was nothing in the round world but a scarecrow. A scarecrow, out of the garden, of course, dumped in the deserted room. Yes, but here amusement ceased. Have scarecrows bare bony feet? Do their heads loll onto their shoulders? Have they iron collars and links of chain about their necks? Can they get up and move, if never so stiffly, across a floor with wagging head and arms close at their sides? And shiver? The slam of the door, the dash downstairs, were followed by a faint. Awakening, Thompson saw Mr. Betts standing over him with a brandy bottle and a very reproachful face. "You shouldn't have done it, sir. Really, you shouldn't. It ain't the way to act by persons as done the best they could for you." Thompson heard words of this kind, but what he said in reply he did not know. Mr. Betts, and perhaps even more, Mrs. Betts, found it hard to accept his apologies and his assurances that he would say no word that could damage the good name of the house. However, they were accepted, and since the train could not now be caught, it was arranged that Thompson should be driven to the town to sleep there. Before he went, the Bettses told him what little they knew. "They say he was landlord here a long time back.
and was in with the highwaymen that had their beat about the heath. That's how he came by his end. Hung in chains, they say, up where you saw that stone on the heath, what the gallows stood in. We heard the story from the people that were here before us. You keep that room shut up, they says, but don't move the bed out and you'll find there won't be no trouble. You're the first person I know on that's seen him since we've been here. I never set eyes on him myself, nor don't want to. And since we put the servants' rooms in the stabling, we ain't had no difficulty that way. Only I do hope, sir, I shall keep a close tongue, considering how an house do get talked about. The promise of silence was kept for many years. The occasion of my hearing the story at last was this. Mr. Thompson came to stay with my father, and it fell upon me to show him to his room. Instead of letting me open the door for him, he stepped forward and threw it open himself, and then stood in the doorway holding up his candle and looking narrowly into the interior. Then he seemed to recollect himself and said, "I beg your pardon. It's very absurd, but I can't help doing that for a particular reason." What that reason was, I heard some days afterwards, and you have heard now.
James Aubrey was reading Rats by M.R. James. The producer was Mitch Raper. And at the same time next week, we'll still be hanging out with J.M. Barrie in Dear Brutus.
You're leaving the seventh dimension.
And that's all I have time for in tonight's Dimension, I'm afraid. Do join my glamorous co-pilot, Nick Briggs, next weekend for more travels with the Doctor and more scares with David Suchet. I'll see you when I'm done being a tourist. Till then, I've been Natalie Haynes. Bye for now.
This is the Museum of Curiosity.
John Lloyd opens the doors on a new series with a new curator.
Mr. Lee Mack.
Hello, John.
Once more, special guests donate objects that fascinate them.
Deep Blue was a computer and it beat Garry Kasparov, the world's then greatest chess player.
With the promise of an interactive experience.
Plug it in, switch it on, and see if anyone or anything in the museum can beat it.
At chess.
The Museum of Curiosity.
I reckon at table tennis I fancy my chances.
Starts tomorrow night at 10 on BBC Radio 4 Extra.
This is BBC Radio 4 Extra.
It's 7 o'clock. Hello, Neil Sleet here. Radiolab is next, and this week it's all about stochasticity, the role of chance and sheer randomness in our lives. And then Michael Palin reads from his book about the mysterious voyage of HMS Erebus. The ship made a successful journey to the Antarctic and was being rigged and loaded for a second expedition to the Northwest Passage. So what went wrong? Erebus is at 8 o'clock.